All right, and there we go. Alicia, I'm not late. What are you talking about? Hardly late. Not late, as a matter of fact. All right, we are live. Yes. Who do we have? Okay. All right. Gian says the audio was good. All right, folks, here we go. Now, we are going to be out tonight, obviously, doing our focus on crime. And then our 4:30 program is going to return on Monday. Maybe this afternoon. It's possible. Could be this afternoon. But tomorrow night, we're going to be, listen, we are standing by for crime. But tomorrow night, we will be with the Westerly Police. So 4th of July weekend, especially the weather's good. Who knows? A lot happening. We're going to be joined by attorney Stephanie Murphy. He's going to be joining us. So, yes, we're going to start in 4 minutes. Let me just double check. Attorney Stephanie Murphy. Yes, audio is good. Let me check our Facebook feed. I think it's good there. Hold on one moment. Okay. There we go. Yes. I believe our Facebook feed is good. X is good. I'm going to check YouTube. Yes. There's Jane Rice. And we're live with the breaking news. Let me do that. Yes, yes, yes. Folks, it never ends. Remember, follow. If you're on YouTube, make sure you follow our page. We are on, I like that, Congressman Les Magaziner. I'll take credit for that. All of our different platforms. And we're going to be joined by Stephanie momentarily. With some of the top, and this is obviously huge legal developments going on. There's also some interesting stories that I like to touch on, and we will touch on, as a matter of fact. We're going to start in just a moment. I hope everyone has a happy and safe 4th. We will be active, though. We'll be out tonight. We'll be active tomorrow, definitely tomorrow night, with Westerly Police. We're going to be back with Cranston Police coming up. And then we're also doing Fugitive Task Force. Now, the only thing is we can't be live for that because we don't want to let people know that we're coming. But that's, it's a little more of a process, just like some of the stuff that we're doing with ICE, that then we have to get it signed off on. So it takes a little bit longer. And I'm trying to, the ICE presence is going to increase in our area. I have to, I got to reevaluate that because it just takes so long for so many people to look at it that by the time they may say, yeah, this is okay. I mean, I don't know who has that kind of time. I like things that are, boom, live. So, so we shall, yes, well, we're going to find out. We're going to talk to Stephanie. Huge. A lot of people are still upset on the Brian Kohberger situation. And we'll talk with Stephanie Murphy on that. Some people are relieved. I just happen to believe a lot of the media are upset because they planned on covering it. Some of the media are already on the ground out there in Idaho, so that's not going to fly. But we have a number of different interesting stories that we're going to touch on with attorney Stephanie Murphy, and we're going to kick off in just 1 minute. Remember, if you're on Facebook, you can share that you are watching, as we're about to hit 97,000 followers on Facebook. Next month will be 100,000, the month of July. TikTok, we're about to hit 110,000 followers. And YouTube, as we make our march towards 70 by the end of the summer, probably 75. All of our platforms growing. All right, we're going to begin. Folks, good afternoon on this pre-holiday. And it is, a lot of people are off, but we are live because there's news. There's always news, and we're always active. We'll be active tonight. We'll be active tomorrow. We're riding with the Westerly Police tomorrow night, and then the entire weekend, the 4th. The weather today, you can tell, is spectacular. Tomorrow's supposed to be a beautiful 4th. Happy 4th of July, one and all. This portion of the program, you know where you can stop in if you're planning on, maybe you're going to go over someone's home, beach house for a cookout. Stop by PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center. They're looking for Jane Rice, annuals, perennials, trees and shrubs, hanging pots. They also have fresh vegetables. You know, I always think that's, show up with, wow, look at these beautiful tomatoes. Look at this fresh corn. Or they have 10-inch, 12-inch moss baskets, hanging impatiens, pansy marigold bags, large selection of beautiful patio pots, vegetable plants and herbs, tropical mandavillas. They are a full-scale nursery. It's PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center. They're open 7 days a week. They grind it right off of Route 4. Stop in and see them. Excuse me, my friends at PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center. Now, remember, you can always reach me. Reach out to our website, which is DePetro.com, brought to you by the Cohasset Inn, 226 Cohasset Avenue, West Warwick. The Cohasset Inn, they're open 7 days a week. The menu is just fantastic and never changing. They're always adding great dishes. Plus, they have the largest bar area in Rhode Island, which I like. I don't like people on top of me sniffling, coughing, sneezing. I don't like it. I like a nice big bar area. And plus, you have the market at Cohasset. You know, that's another thing. They have 4th of July gift baskets. Good price point on them. The Cohasset Inn, 226 Cohasset Avenue, West Warwick. Well, folks, remember, you never know. You don't know when you may be in need of, where you think to yourself, I could use some legal advice. And what I encourage you to do is don't ask your next door neighbor. Don't ask your know-it-all brother-in-law. Don't ask the person that sits next to your cubicle at work. Suddenly, you may be in a situation that you need some legal advice. My suggestion, Marin, Barrett, and Murphy, 50 years combined Rhode Island criminal defense experience. Call Stephanie, 401-228-8271. You never know where suddenly maybe you just need some legal info. 401-228-8271 for Marin, Barrett, and Murphy. And speaking of that, let's bring her on. She is our legal expert. It is, in fact, attorney Stephanie Murphy. And there she is. Good afternoon, Stephanie.
Hi, John. How are you?
I am very well. Happy 4th to you and your family. I hope it's a happy and safe 4th for you. Let's start off. Yesterday was, I think it was just really interesting, Stephanie, because with the national news, the two top stories were legal stories. Obviously, what's going on in Washington, but both the Diddy trial and also the Brian Kohberger trial. Either one. Let's talk about both. Your choice of which one you want to start off commenting on.
Let's talk about the P. Diddy trial first.
Okay, let's talk about P. Diddy.
Sounds good. So as I think we mentioned and talked about a couple of shows ago, in terms of the two big charges that he was charged with, from all the testimony we heard and all the witness recounts of what was going on in court, since there's no media or news cameras there, it really seemed like, it was a really bad domestic and a really bad sex assault kind of case. But, we were very unsure about the sex trafficking charges. So I was not surprised. I was a little thrown off by their, the day before about coming back with kind of a split verdict. That kind of threw me off a little bit. but I was not surprised that the government couldn't prove those two charges at all based on, the news reports and the witness testimony. So thought it was very interesting. And then the whole thing about him getting held pending sentencing, the whole kind of, it was a really exciting kind of news week for that case.
Stephanie, it is interesting, and people need to realize this was under the Biden administration that they brought these charges, but it is somewhat surprising to me. I mean, these are very serious charges. They know he's a high-profile individual, and when it came down to it, you and I discussed the case, it certainly seemed to be a domestic violence situation, and maybe that they were, flying and paying prostitutes across state lines, but the charges of, RICO and very serious charges really could have put him away for life. What is your thought to, how does something like that take hold where, to me, it's clear they didn't have the case they thought they had?
I mean, even the defense attorney's closing arguments in terms of, a bad domestic, a bad relationship, we were admitting to this kind of stuff. This just seemed to be very trumped up charges that, the government could have resolved, by not going forward on those charges. But I guess the government thought that they could prove it. I mean, the RICO charges are really, really complex and really, really difficult. I mean, maybe if they didn't have that one, could they have gotten the other top charge? Possibly. But because those charges are so different and so complex, I just don't think they had the evidence to even bring it forward or had the probable cause, in all honesty, to arrest on those charges. But you never know what the government has. The government always has a lot more information than we're aware of. So
Right.
it was interesting to see what they had at trial. And right from the get-go, it really seemed that they didn't have those two charges. So I'm not surprised by the verdict, but I'm surprised that, none of those charges were dropped or, amended at some point.
That is an excellent point. And I was mentioning yesterday, one takeaway with the Karen Reed trial is many times seemingly, and you would know, but the real battle can be in some of these hearings where the jury's not present. And it's very possible, I didn't follow it every day, that the defense argued successfully to keep evidence out.
Right.
And so whatever case the government maybe thought they had, really seems that a lot of times some of these pretrial hearings, whether it's on experts or even just some evidence, if that gets ruled out, then, you're sitting there that you don't have maybe the case you thought you were going to have.
Well, absolutely. And we're not always privy to all of those, especially in federal court, especially in this case. So I don't know if the government's case just went in as they expected, or if they lost some, on motions and stuff like that. Some of their evidence couldn't come in. I'm not really sure, but it doesn't seem like it was the most, the greatest case from what they were able to present. So, you're probably absolutely right. And some of the stuff they wanted to say or have witnesses testify, they weren't able to get in or authenticate.
Now, one last question on this. He's not totally out of the woods. It sounds as though he could face, some kind of jail time, but it's nowhere close to what he could have been looking at.
I mean, and also due to the lack of criminal history in the federal system, and the guidelines and all of that, they do take into a lot of different factors. And although he could have been charged, it seems like on so many different domestics and assault cases, he really wasn't. So he's kind of coming in with clean hands in terms of a criminal record. And, the penalties are really up to 10 years. And that's really for, a repeat offender with, a bit of a rap sheet and stuff like that. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. I'm sure he's going to get some time. He has a lot of time under his belt already. Right. But it'll be interesting. I don't think he's going to get anywhere near the max at all.
Excellent point. Time served. Now, as far as the Brian Kohberger, it's really turned into even a controversy, Stephanie Murphy, and this is where I break off with some individuals. I know some people are planning some very in-depth coverage. There's one outlet I was dealing with that was saying, hey, any way we could convince you to go out to Idaho to maybe be in the car and cover this. But could you touch on an agreement was reached. Therefore, they don't have to go forward with a trial, which would have been very costly, very lengthy. There's no guarantee on what an outcome could be. He is spared the death penalty. I'm very curious, and I have some questions, your thought on how that case has now come down.
Well, I definitely think, with the defense losing most of their motions and stuff like that, they weren't really, gaining strength on any of their motions or other people who could have done this crime. So I wasn't surprised. And I know we talked about it last week briefly, and that was the story I brought up, that I wouldn't be surprised if, the defense tried to negotiate something for a plea deal to save his life in terms of the death penalty. So I wasn't really surprised by that at all.
But what about this business of there are some individuals saying, the family's denied justice. They're never going to really know his motivation. I just don't know how much. I'm not sure what is to be gained. I don't think there would be a logical explanation here. If you could just touch on the thought process of the prosecutors offering this and then accepting it.
Right. It sounded to me from the evidence they had and stuff like that, pretty much looked like it could be a guilty finding, but you never know with a jury. You absolutely never know. So first of all, one of the prosecution's fears is making sure they can get a guilty verdict 100% on all the counts and everything like that. The other thing that they have to worry about is all the appellate work that comes after a finding of guilty. There's DNA, there's rulings that the judge made that could absolutely get appealed. And you never know how long that's going to last. If a judge overturned any of the suppression motions about the DNA, anything like that, it can always go up on appeal. And what could happen is he could get granted a new trial. And this could be 5-10 years down the road. And then all of a sudden you're looking for witnesses, you're looking for evidence, you're making sure the chain of custody is all right, authentication. And so you always have to worry about the appellate world too, of either a conviction getting overturned or a new trial being granted. And then you have a death penalty matter where all these other appellate, actions come into play too. So with this plea deal, we know he's not getting out. We know he has no chance at parole. He admitted, he pled guilty. I watched the video broadcast of it. He pled guilty. So I really hope that the families who are against it could find some closure in that, and not having the unknown of what a jury would do, not having an unknown of the appellate process. But I understand both sides of the arguments. And I do agree with kind of the press analysis of they were, this is going to be a big story, a lot of coverage and stuff like that. And now this kind of all taken away. But I don't know if even during the trial that a motive would ever come out. He has a right not to testify. And there's a bunch of just different things. And I don't think he would ever testify in this case. So getting a motive out in a trial where you don't have text messages that, talk about the motive, or without the defendant getting on the stand, I don't think all this stuff that the families wanted to come out would have really came out, in all honesty.
Would he, it's a good question. I know we have the son of Sam law, which prevents people from basically capitalizing on their crimes, but would he be eligible to do an interview of some sort?
I'm sure he could be, if he wanted to, but I highly doubt that he's really going to talk about this and the motives and kind of give the closure that I think some of the families are looking for. As his defense attorney, that would be something that I would, even the Karen Reed and all those interviews and stuff like that, it's never a good idea. So I don't think, he absolutely could have the possibility. Whether or not he actually does, I think it's another question.
It's an interesting point you raise about the death penalty, because you do have, for instance, the Boston bomber, right? The brother that's alive, that's still going on. He's I believe in a prison in Colorado. That is still going on from 2013, death penalty. And then on the other hand, you do have the Scott Peterson situation where, it's all these years later, and now you have the Innocence Project in LA saying, he deserves a new trial. And that is something that when he was convicted in the murder of his wife, Lacey Peterson, and the unborn child, you'd never think that he would maybe see the light of day. But I can then see the argument where someone says, all these years later, these people emerge and they're trying to get out again.
Right. And it goes on forever. The appellate process and post-conviction relief, it goes on forever. So in terms of this case, I think there should be some closure, and hopefully for the family that this is over, this is done. He cannot appeal, all these different things. So I really hope that even if they're really against it, and I understand why they're against this plea deal, or maybe not being notified or spoken to as much as they wanted, I really, really hope for the victims' families that this is closure for them, and they know that he's behind bars. And knowing that he's young, knowing that he's behind bars for all those years, that's unimaginable. To me. So hopefully the family can take the victims' families can find some sort of peace with that.
Now, some other legal stories. I really like this story that we're going to talk about out of North Providence, because to me, this is an example. I have no idea what happened, but the North Providence employee that is being investigated, North Providence town employee accused of poisoning another worker's drink. I don't know the individuals. I don't know what to me, there's an example where someone might actually think they're being funny or pulling a prank, or they, film the person doing that and they think it'll be a viral video. But this is a serious matter where suddenly someone doesn't realize they could be facing very serious consequences.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different charges. Like, we were just having this debate in our office about what the charge could be or would be. There's two very serious charges under Rhode Island General Law 1116.5 and 1116.6. One is, poisoning with intent to kill. That's a major charge. And 1116.6 is a felony charge where you face up to 20 years. And that could be, a joke that's gone bad and stuff like that. I read in the article that he's hospitalized, and I think that's really an eye-opening experience, that if it was a joke, it's not a funny joke, and this person was injured, and there's serious, serious consequences to this action.
Now, Providence, they have a high-profile situation. It almost seems to be Mayor Smiley isn't sure what to do, but this is, I think it was, in a vote, that this officer Hanley can return to the force in Providence. He had been taken out. The chief seemingly doesn't want him back. The deputy chief was on record, didn't want him back. But this was for excessive abuse. He was arresting this guy and punching him and saying things.
Yeah, he got charged criminally too, and that went through district court, superior court, all these different things, a trial, and then he ended up pleading, I think, last December. So it's really interesting. The city can definitely appeal that decision to the superior court. So I think it'll be really interesting. But I just always go back to like human nature, and why would somebody want a job back somewhere where, people don't want you there, and the scrutiny is going to be huge. You're going to be looked at. I don't get that personal aspect of it. But I do understand that the panel met. They did, say that he could go back to work. So it's really interesting. But I understand both sides. Somebody wanting to go back to work, but also the city side of, they're trying to build up trust in the police and everything like that. And this is kind of like a slap in the face of, an officer got charged by their own department, and now this officer can come back.
Yeah, and as someone that, I'm as supportive as police as you're going to get, that guy should not be a police officer. This was totally unnecessary. He could have just drove away, went down, the whole thing. That is someone that, to me, doesn't have the temperament to be a police officer. And you're right, the chief doesn't want him there. The deputy chief doesn't want him there.
Right.
But there he is. Now, also, Stephanie Murphy, what about this situation? Pawtucket did release the body cam footage of the officer-involved shooting, and they're coming under fire with this.
Yeah, so I took a look at it, and I took a look at everything. With every officer shooting in the state of Rhode Island, it gets reviewed by the police, it gets reviewed by the Attorney General's office. Yep. So I'm sure they're in that process and stuff like that. But, this is a case where so many of these, gun cases or, fake gun cases with people with a mental illness and everything like that. This is one of these cases where, the worst nightmare happened. The police are involved. There's somebody who believes there's a gun involved, and there's somebody who has a history of some mental illness. So the whole thing is a nightmare all around. It's going to come down to what the officer in his position reasonably believed was the situation and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to be the Monday morning quarterback on something like this and put yourself into what the officer was thinking. But you really do have to look at what the officer was thinking, what the call was for, what other people were reporting, what the officer himself saw, what protection he had, So it's really a case by case basis. So it'll be really interesting to see what the investigation leads to.
And it is, people need to understand, this is extensive. This is also state police gets involved, as you said, the Attorney General, Pawtucket Police, when there's an officer involved shooting. I'm just curious, before we move on to Murphy's Law, what is the general practice that should happen? First of all, Pawtucket's had an uptick in shootings and gun violence. So a call comes in, someone says, hey, there's a guy downtown, it's a Sunday morning, and it looks like he's pointing a gun at someone. But what is the procedure of when an officer arrives and again, we don't know the full story of what happened, but normally what should take place in a situation like that?
I think trying to talk to the person from far away in terms of dropping the weapon, putting your hands up, all the stuff that you see police officers do all the time. Sometimes in situations, this person is really riled up or not really there mentally, so you can't do that. I mean, the last thing you want to do is get close enough to somebody with a weapon by yourself. Even with a taser, you can't use a taser from that far away. So I think the protocol of, dropping whatever is in your hands up, on the ground. I mean, I think that's almost an automatic for any situation like that. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what the investigation shows of what happened and also what the officer knew at the time they arrived on scene.
Right. We don't know that. And it also should be noted where this could have gone. I mean, he is alive, but there were other shots that were fired that went into, there could have been a pedestrian shot and killed. There could have been someone inside of a building or a car that could have been shot and killed, and the individual could have been shot and killed. One thing I will say about this that doesn't get covered a lot, but I know from being out and covering different scenes, there are a number of people, I'm not saying this individual, but people should understand there's a number of people that are out in various cities and they carry for what they think is their protection, which is it's a pellet gun that looks like a real gun, or it's a BB gun that looks like a real gun. It's not a real gun, but they use it almost as a sense of protection. But the problem is if then they show it to someone who has a real gun, and then you have this type of scenario. Folks,
or even they show it and they get charged as if it is a real firearm, and in their mind it's not a firearm, but it's a perception to the public and to a police officer. A police officer cannot tell, from 20 or 30 feet away if it's a real firearm or not. And they shouldn't have to make that determination before engaging somebody. So there's a lot of different things coming into play on this one.
Folks, it's time for Murphy's Law. This is a story that attorney Stephanie Murphy has found. And what do you have for us this week?
Well, this is one of your listeners reached out, and it was about texting and driving. So they are on a crackdown. All the police departments are. And what I just wanted to explain, and I explained to your listener, was texting and driving is not literally holding your phone and actually texting somebody. Rhode Island has a hands-free device law. That means you can't be on your phone, poking on it, looking for directions, anything like that. So I thought it was a really interesting question. People think, okay, I wasn't texting, I'm using my phone for directions. And in Rhode Island, you literally can only talk to your phone. You can't have it in your hand. You can't be touching it, or you will get charged with that violation. And it could result in a loss of license. Multiple violations are really, really awful for what it can do to your driving record, to your license suspensions. So I thought it was a really interesting point. People kind of take it literally as you can't text and drive. It's a lot more broad than that. You can't be poking your phone for directions. You can't be looking at something. I think your listener got stopped, and the response to the officer was like, "I'm just looking for directions," and they still got written up. So I thought it was really interesting, and I just wanted to kind of make the public aware that it's a hands-free law, meaning you can't even have your phone on a stand and be touching it. In all honesty, if you talk to it through Bluetooth, that's fine, but it's pretty interesting.
Folks, again, she is attorney Stephanie Murphy. Stephanie, excellent job, above and beyond. As always, enjoy the long weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.
You too. Stay safe and cool. Thanks, John.
Oh. All right, folks, there it is. And let me just do that. Okay, there we go. And right there. Okay, here we go. Yes, I think it's interesting. I think it's very interesting, as a matter of fact. And also, I'm not the preachy type, but some people just overdo it with the fireworks. Just don't. These people that have, there's a lot of alcohol and explosive. It's small amounts, but it's kind of a form of dynamite. I just don't. There's no reason for that. There's no reason for someone to then get jammed up in that manner. Folks, this portion of our program, remember, this summer, for all of your propane needs. Heating and cooling. Call Propane Plus today, 401-885-4209. In Massachusetts, 508-252-3359. Propane Plus, heating and cooling, residential or commercial. You can depend on Propane Plus. Give them a call today. Always there for you 24/7. If you log on to their website, it's propaneplus.com. You just type in your zip code, residential or commercial. It's Propane Plus. Again, in Rhode Island, call them 401-885-4209, or in Massachusetts, 508-252-3359 for Propane Plus. All right. Well, like everyone else, I'll be enjoying the holiday weekend tomorrow, but that's just as far as this time. But we will, in fact, then be, as I said, we're very active. A long weekend like this, it brings out a lot of crime. So we'll be out, and we never know, whatever it may be. And we are trying to, at some point, we will also, we used to do Facebook, YouTube, and then for different reasons, the connection wasn't as clear. We'll probably try that again. A lot of times we upload the videos to YouTube, but we will be active tonight. And then this weekend, especially, I am glad for all the businesses that the weather, I'm actually glad for everyone. The weather's going to be good with all the rain that we have had. Yes. Claudia, isn't she terrific? Stephanie is great. And speaking of that, I am going to touch on another legal case. But folks, I want to remind you about Watson Materials. Listen, your outside can look spectacular with Watson Materials, the largest selection of landscape materials in Rhode Island. 401-885-0600. 401-885-0600. Landscape lighting, pavers, retaining walls, natural stone, cobblestone, decorative stone. Watson Materials. 401-885-0600. The most complete selection of landscape materials in Rhode Island is Watson Materials. 401-885-0600. Happy 4th of July from everyone at Watson Materials. Now, I want to just check, because we are waiting on news. I know in Washington, and it's so embarrassing with, how about that North Providence story? The person, I'm glad she touched on that. They emptied out their drink and they put in, fluid for your car. And then the person drank it and they're in the hospital. Like, who does something like that? I want to just check what is the latest right now regarding a North Providence DPW workers on unpaid leave poisoning another town employee. The worker put windshield washer fluid into an employee's sports drink. How on earth is that remotely? But I could almost see where someone thinks that, that would be funny in some way. No, it sounds like everything is still going on in DC. I want to tell you a couple stories that we're talking about. One is, especially in this part of the country, Rhode Island and Massachusetts, we really don't, if you're like me, you don't have representation in Washington. And in Rhode Island, you have Congressman Les Magaziner. He said, how can I support anything that takes whatever the number is, 11 million people off Medicaid? Well, I don't think it's unreasonable. We're not talking about elderly. We're not talking about people. We're talking about adults. We're not talking about adults with children. Just normal working age adults. That's number one. That get free Medicaid, but who also is on Medicaid are the undocumented. Rhode Island is notorious. The reason why the state of Rhode Island budget is so high is because of all these people that come here, and the state offers them more generous benefits than they could get in other states. And it's all free Medicaid. And it starts with There are people that, women that arrive in Rhode Island and they're 8 or 9 months pregnant. Many times they're from Guatemala or other places. They arrive. The first thing they do is they go to Women and Infants Hospital. And then they get put on, oh, are you new here? They have the translator. Yes. Oh, welcome. And they get put on Medicaid. Now, Medicare is for older individuals, but they're now put on Medicaid. And then suddenly they have the child. Now they claim the child's an American citizen. So not only do they stay and the child stay, but if they have any other children, then they bring them up. If they have any other relatives, they bring them up and then enroll them all into Medicaid. And guess who ends up having to foot the bill for that? Well, look in the mirror. You do, I do, we do. So this business of, I don't have a problem with that. You know, during COVID, you saw, and it's nothing new, but if you pay people not to work, they're not going to work. Why should someone who could work but choose not to, why should they get all free medical? Why should they be qualified under that? Why should we have to pay? And I think it's actually even higher than what Magazina was saying. Why should we have to pay free medical for people from other countries who come and live here, and then we have to? I've never understood that. I like the idea that it'd be better for many of these people to get out and work. And one of the conditions they want to have is it's a certain number of hours a week that you have to work. You know, I've talked about that with those that receive, we don't call it welfare anymore, right? They just receive government services, whether it's EBT cards, you don't call them welfare, you don't call it food stamps, but housing assistance and so forth. I've never understood why someone that receives that once a week on a Saturday, they have to go to a park and rake leaves for 3 hours or pick up litter for 3 hours. It would probably be better for them if they were actually doing something. Maybe it would motivate them to get full-time employment. So right now, I think it's interesting what's going on right now, where you have a mayor of New York. Well, as far as he'd like to be the mayor of New York, he won the Democrat primary. And he's talking about redistribution of wealth. He's talking about if someone comes up with an idea or a concept or somehow earns $1 billion. Right now, he's saying that should be capped. We take the rest and we distribute it the way we see fit. So, and as I've talked about, the problem with that is then it becomes 500 million. And then it becomes 100 million. And then it becomes 50 million. I mean, that's what Venezuela did. And anyone with money fled the country. But you have one side saying, everyone's got to pull their weight, right? Anyone that's ever grown up in a large household. I'm youngest of 7. Everyone had to do something. Each night I would set the table, fill the water glasses. We're talking about 9 people sitting down to dinner. We'd have to go out on the weekend and help my dad, raking leaves. All 9 people, my sisters, vacuuming and cleaning. I mean, helping my mother prepare the meal every night for 9 people. And it was just, that's the way it was. It was accepted. But we have too many people now, like that Democrat, he won the mayoral primary in New York City, who talks about government-run grocery stores, $30 minimum wage, $30 an hour minimum wage, redistribution of wealth, opening the prisons, closing prisons, no more police, social workers. I have no interest in living in a society like that. Folks, this portion of our program, now remember, are you thinking, maybe you are, of a new kitchen or a new bathroom? Arch Design Builders, Call them today, 401 207 4124. 401 207 4124. Maybe you want to remodel your kitchen. Maybe you want to remodel your bathroom. Maybe you want to remodel your basement or your deck or a special project. Arch Design Builders. Call them today. It all starts with that meeting with Ed and Roxanne at Arch Design Builders. 401 218 9707. 401 218 9707 for Arch Design Builders. I also want to mention it always comes in handy if you can pick up the phone and call an attorney and get a little free legal advice. And you heard attorney Stephanie Murphy offer that. Now, if you're listening or watching on this Thursday, if something happens, and you never know what it could be, maybe something in your neighborhood, maybe something with a family member, maybe someone who, caught a ticket for they were using their phone for directions, you can call. Just say you're a friend of the show. That's the code word. 401 228 8271. That's who I would call. Marin, Barrett, and Murphy Law Firm. Call Stephanie. She'll straighten you out. Now, as far as the Karen Reed trial, right now, there's no developments with it. Everything has an end date. Maybe it'll come back up, right? Maybe it'll come up, but what happened. And I also look at the landscape that the O'Keefes are not speaking. None of their friends are speaking. None of the witnesses are speaking. The only side that's speaking is the Karen Reed side, but there's nothing new with that. But there is, however, kind of a new development from that side. And I, excuse me, I'm glad that it's happening because it's demonstrating that there are certain members who supported her that they actually have no idea what they're talking about. And to me, it exposes them, just how loony they are. And I'm talking about, I covered this story, Brian Walsh. What is he accused of? Cohasset, beautiful wife, Anna. She had a great job in Washington, D.C. I've spoken with people that she worked with. The problem for Anna is she married this creep named Brian Walsh, who I think he got in trouble for art forgery. And I think the family had some money. His mother has a condo, I think, if I remember, in Swampscott. And Anna met him when she was young. And then he got in trouble for art forgery. There are people like that. Someone that thinks that they're buying a real painting or something like that of art, and then it turns out to be fraud. So he was looking at and I think still is, serious charges for forgery, because you're not talking about you gyp someone out of $100. People online, and in that type of world, you're truly dealing with people all over the world. There could be someone in London, France, India, the Far East, that they're interested in something. So he was accused of that. And I think he, very serious charges and even convicted of it. So Anna Walsh, who was this, by all accounts, lovely, successful, had the 3 boys, and she got a great job in Washington, D.C., where she was loved, and she used to have to go back and forth. And Brian, the bust-out loser that she met when she was young, he was in Cohasset with the boys. And so what the allegations are is she announced that and I know someone that was with her in DC who decorated the rooms. She basically told him, listen, you're either going to prison, you're on house arrest. He was only able to go back and forth between where they lived in Cohasset and also where the mother lived at a condo in Swampscott on the North Shore. And that they decorated the rooms, and that she basically told him over Christmas and New Year's, listen, you're going to prison, boo-hoo, and I'm bringing the boys to live with me in DC. And she was excited about it. And by all accounts, and I think the Cohasset, Massachusetts State Police have a very strong case against Brian Walsh, that after they had a guest over for dinner, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, and he's accused of he killed his wife, and then she never showed up for work. She was supposed to fly back to DC, and then he set to work, and it's horrible to even think about, but he dismembered her body in their Cohasset home, and then basically put her remains. They found some in a dumpster where the mother lived in Swampscott, and then some other remains. They traced his vehicle going to, I don't think it was Brockton, but it was right next to Brockton, and they had him go into the Home Depot, right near Cohasset. I mean, they basically have him nailed. I remember the Cohasset police. They went by the house, and the seats in the back were down. And then when they came back, because someone at work called and said, hey, she didn't show up. And his initial story was, oh, she took an Uber to Logan. I don't know what happened. She must be in DC somewhere. So the Cohasset police, they saw the seats were down, and I think they had plastic over them. Then when they came back later, the seats were back up and the car had been vacuumed. And then if you remember, they had the Google search. What do you do with, a dead body? He was using the son's iPad for that. And it said dumpster, all this. I mean, it's so horrific to think about. And then he had that weird grin when they grabbed him. And they also, right near where the mother's condo in Swampscott, they found some of her, not a lot, but some remains. And then right next to Cohasset, another set of dumpsters. So anyhow, I was outside the house because the search was going on. And it was a really odd story, and it was in January. And because I was there and I was live on both, TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, I started to, some of the people that were very friendly with her in DC, they flew up and they saw some of my footage. So that's how I then communicated with them. But anyhow, long story short, do you know that, right? So Brian Walsh, I mean, to me, they don't have a body, but they have, I think they found her, if I remember correctly, they found her license, some of her jewelry, some samples, tissue. I mean, it's just terrible what happened. But by all accounts, they have them. I mean, it's a solid case. But right now, there are some people, and they're actually posting. I have to communicate with the people. I haven't talked to them in a little while, but there are people they're now posting. They're rooting for Brian Walsh to get away with it. Folks, that is not logical. That is absolutely so, but I'm glad they're saying it, because to me it exposes who you're dealing with. Anyone that would say that, I hope Brian Walsh gets away. Who would say that? That is demented. There is no evidence to point to anything other than Brian Walsh took the life of his wife, Anna, and left those 3 brothers without their mother. And then he just disposed of her. I don't even like talking about it or thinking about it. Her body like trash. And there are people saying, oh, Brian Walsh gets away with it. Who would think that? These are not well people. These are not intelligent people. They're not logical people that would say that. They're not sensible people that would say that. What? But however, what did their hero say? I was cheering for OJ to get away with it. This is where things are going now. We're rooting for, we're not talking about tax evasion. We're not talking about armed robbery. Where they're rooting for, there's something wrong mentally with someone that would say, what do you mean you take it? Well, you're going to be in prison, so I'm going to take the boys to live in DC with me. And then his solution is, and he looked it up, about how soon can you recover insurance on a body. So a missing body and so forth. He is a psychopath, like Scott Peterson, to Lacey Peterson. On second thought, I don't think I want to be married with a child. Remember Lacey Peterson's mother saying in court, divorce was an option. You know what was not an option? I think I'll just get rid of her and our unborn child. Like there's something mentally wrong with someone like that. I'm rooting for Brian Walsh. Who thinks that? That should be a headline. Of course, the Boston media. Let's just focus on fireworks on the Cape. Holy cow. I saw that and I thought that can't be accurate. No reasonable person. Really? I'm rooting for Craig Price to get it. So now we're rooting. I'm rooting for Brian Kohberger to get away. Like, what are you talking about? These people are insane. Remember, Roofco, Rhode Island. Do you need a new roof? If you want to improve the value of your home or business, one of the best and easiest ways to do that is get a new roof. Roofco, Rhode Island. Call them 401-868-7149. 401-868-7149. Roofco, Rhode Island. Maybe it's from wind damage, leaky roof, missing lifted or curled shingles, granules in the gutter. They'd be happy to inspect your roof for wind damage and give you a free estimate. Call Roofco, Rhode Island today. 401-868-7149. 401-868-7149. Roofco, Rhode Island. Listen, let them inspect your roof. 401-868-7149. There's a very good chance that insurance will cover it anyway. Roofco, Rhode Island. Maybe you just felt, oh, that wind was bad. Some of my shingles came off. Whoa, that's wind damage, Harry. Don't be a hagbag. Call Roofco, 401-868-7149. Now, Frank called me or sent me a message. Frank has some water damage at his business. Pipe bursts of something. He said, who's that company you recommend we call? Call ServPro of Providence, Frank. 401-941-5500. 401-941-5500. They're fast. They're thorough. They're professional. Fire damage, flood damage, mold. ServPro. 401-941-5500. 401-941-5500. Fast, thorough, professional. It's ServPro of Providence. Well, folks, again, good afternoon. We will be out and active later. There is a limit to, I am glad when certain individuals start to speak up. There have been people propped up, oh, smart, diligent, hard work, but no, clowns. I'm rooting for Brian. Hey, what do you expect? I was rooting for OJ to get away with it. I'm rooting for Brian Walsh to get away with it. Who in their right mind would think that way? Holy cow. Those types of people, actually. I'm answering my own question. Those types of people would be rooting for someone like that to get away with it, is the answer. As far as crime, as I've said, I think it is going to be a violent summer. I also, the local media is making a lot of what happened with Pawtucket. And, I don't know. That officer is going to be investigated. That is a life-changing situation. We're talking about the Pawtucket police officer. Saw someone, a gun pointed at them. They fired. Turned out to be a toy gun. But I can't stand. If you're one of those people that all police are corrupt, you hate the cops, this is the wrong platform and show. I don't find that. Most police never fire their weapon. The ones that do, it's life-changing. It changes their life. It changes their career. There's situations they're put into, and then the way people erupt. There's so many people with policing that they're out to get them, and they're in a sense gunning to get them. So here's the thought: whoever is in charge of, whoever helps people that have some mental challenges, so to speak, if there's anyone that deals with individuals that have mental difficulties, mental hurdles, however you want to phrase it, here's a thought: they shouldn't have a toy gun. They shouldn't have a replica. They shouldn't have anything that looks like a weapon. Because if they're ever in a situation, it sounds as though, without knowing everything, that they're not going to handle it properly. So that's a thought. I think it's a difficult situation. I remember 2 years ago, we were out at night, and I think it was in Warwick. And so when I was live, these kids came to where I was live. And I don't remember exactly what the incident was, but they somehow bought online they were squirt guns, but they pulled them out. They looked like handguns, and the mother was right there, and they're squirting at me. Oh, we watch you, and I said to the mother, like, where did you get those? It's like, oh, my oldest son got them online, but I said, those are really dangerous. If you looked at it, and I'm standing right there, I am telling you, it looked like a Glock. And they were like in their teens. And my point in saying that is you totally I could anyhow, see a situation where if this were nighttime and there's some kind of a disturbance and someone comes around a corner and this kid's got the squirt gun, I'm telling you, as someone that's owned Glocks, it looked like a Glock. My oldest son bought them online. Yeah, there's a reason they don't sell them retail. Where did he buy them online? Yeah, some company out of Japan or China or something. I don't think they should have them. They're standing there. They rode away on their bikes. The mother, yeah, they bought them online. They look real, don't? Yeah, they do look real. And I don't mean that in a good way, by the way. Mrs. C. June Cleaver. No, Marsha Brady, or whatever the mother's name was. No, that's not a good thing. There's a reason why, if you go to certain stores and they sell squirt guns, that they don't look like a real gun. Yeah, my oldest son got them online. He's in the can. He's doing some times for B&E. Yeah, I don't think that's a smart idea. Who do you think would get blamed? Police shoot, whoever, 16-year-old, 17-year-old. Folks, this portion of the program, J. Perry Paving, they want to wish everyone a very happy 4th of July. Give them a call. And remember, they have a great package for veterans. J. Perry Paving, 401-732-1730, 401-732-1730. If you're a veteran, or maybe your parents are, or your grandparents, or your son, or your grandmother, your mom, J. Perry Paving, call them. They'll give you a great deal for a veteran. Get that driveway paved. 401-732-1730. Now, if you're listening to the radio, you're going to hear the 2 o'clock news. Everyone else will be out tonight. Road Patrol Live. I want to thank Gian. Great job. Thank you to all our mods. Many people will watch this on replay. Folks, everyone, have a happy and safe 4th of July. We will be active, though, online. Back on the radio on Monday. Stay tuned for the 2 o'clock news. Carol Brady.